Welcome everyone to the 2016-17 CIP Grants Kick Off webinar. My name is Kelly Musinski and I help run the Community Investments Program here at the Elks National Foundation along with my awesome colleagues Jocelyn Moya and Chelsea Dennis, who will be helping me with the presentation today. Our office is known by a lot of different names: the Lodge Grants Office, CIP Grants Office, the Programs Department. We're here almost every Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4:30, and we're here for you. So please call us or email us, and we're happy to provide program information and assistance. And our contact information will be at the end of the webinar. So again, I'm Colleen, and I want to introduce you to first Jocelyn Moyle. Hold on just a second.
Hi everyone, I'm Jocelyn and I am the Programs Assistant in the Community Investments Program Office. I deal mostly with the Beacon Grants, but also sometimes the Promise Grants. But now Chelsea's going to be taking over those, so let me hand you over to her.
Hi everyone, I'm Chelsea. I also work as a Programs Assistant in the CIP office. I work with the Gratitude Grants as well as the Promise Grants, which will be a first this time around.
Thanks, ladies, and you'll be hearing from both Jocelyn and Chelsea later on in this presentation. But before we begin, let's go through a couple troubleshooting webinar information points. So if you're having trouble hearing me, turn up the volume, and to ask a question, type it into the chat box on your right-hand side. If at any point during this presentation you get disconnected, no worries, just click on the email link again and re-enter the meeting. If you're having any other issues, please call the ENF at 773-755-4728, and Valerie will be able to help you out there. And just so you know, if you have to leave early, that's no problem at all. A recording of this webinar will be posted tomorrow at enf.elks.org/CIP Resources, and that's where we'll have all of our CIP webinars for the entire year. So again, most often, if you can't hear me, turn up the volume. That's usually the biggest issue we have with running our webinars. But otherwise, sit back and relax. I'll go through the slides and talk about the Community Investments Program for 16-17. So, a quick summary of the 2016-17 CIP grant offerings this year. And this year, the Elks National Foundation will allocate $9.8 million to fund the Community Investments Program. And here are some of the highlights for the new additions for this year. The bonus continues. Every lodge in which more than 50% of its lodges donated to the ENF in 2015-16 will be eligible for a bonus when applying for the Gratitude Grant. This is something that we started last year and we're continuing it again this year. So you can always see if your lodge met the bonus goal by going to the CIP Resources Center and clicking on the CIP Participation Report, and I'll show you where that is in a couple of slides. But great news, we've continued this bonus to even further reward those lodges who are doing such a great job fundraising for the ENF. Another exciting announcement for 2016-17 is we're increasing the budgeted amount for our impact grants. So we are increasing the total pool to a record $600,000 available to give out in impact grants. That's a really exciting addition. We'll go over impact grants later in this webinar as well. Our last big addition, it's not even a big addition or a big change, but we've slightly updated two of our deadlines for the grants. The Freedom Grant application now closes July 31st, and that's coming up like a freight train. So in the past, we've extended that deadline through the middle of August, but this year, to kind of fall in line with the rest of the grant cycle, the Freedom Grant application will now close on July 31st, so keep that in mind, please. And in addition, our impact grant applications opened on July 1st, which is a little bit later than usual, but again, just to line everyone up in the grant cycle, those impact grant applications opened on July 1st this year. So not too many big changes to the CIP this year. It's kind of business as usual. So for those of you, especially who are veterans to the CIP program, no new surprises. Just the most exciting is that $100,000 increase to the impact grant pool. So we're really excited about that. So what is the CIP? What are we offering here as far as CIP grants go? Well, here they are in their beautiful colors. All of our grant offerings for 2016-17 with a little bit on each. So we have the Gratitude Grant, which are available to the lodges who meet the per capita goal for giving. Our Beacon Grant, which is open to every lodge for an ongoing charitable Elks-driven community project. Promise grants, which are available to the first 500 lodges that apply with a qualifying Elks-led youth event. Our Freedom Grants, like I just mentioned, which close at the end of this month, which are competitive and will be awarded to 180 lodges whose projects are judged to best serve the needs of veterans and or active duty military. And of course, our largest and most competitive grant, the Purple Impact Grants, which is up to $10,000 for large-scale Elks-run service projects in the community. Those are, again, our most competitive grants and are up to $10,000. So keep in mind all of these. This is just a quick overview of each. We'll dive into each in a little bit more detail. New this year as well, we've decided to color code all of our grants. So those colors you see on your screen are the colors for each of the grants for the rest of the year. So anytime you see the yellow, think of Gratitude Grant. Anytime you see the purple, think of Impact. This is also nicely laid out in our new CIP field guide, which was sent to lodge secretaries in the middle of June, and hopefully you all got a copy. So all this information contained in this presentation is also in our CIP field guide. It's also on our website. As many places as we can get it so everyone understands and knows all of the basics for each of our grant opportunities. So speaking of basics, before we dive into each, let's go through just the overarching ideas and overarching restrictions on our CIP grants. So we'll play a little game. Let's play red light, green light, and let's start with green light. Please keep these guidelines in mind when planning a grant project. We want to make sure that grants follow the IRS-defined charitable categories. You know, the CIP has grown a lot since it began in 2005, and the intention behind CIP grants is to help Elks and lodges expand their charitable activities. So we continually encourage lodges to think about using grants for new projects if possible, and these projects do need to follow these charitable guidelines. So a project that you're thinking of needs to do, you know, at least one of these things: relieve the poor, distressed, or underprivileged, advance education, but not through scholarships, lessens the burden of government, lessen neighborhood tensions, eliminate prejudice and or discrimination, and combat juvenile delinquency. So remember, projects with active Elk involvement are best, and as long as your project follows these, at least one of these categories, you're good to go. So keeping in mind what it means to be charitable, keeping in mind that as a 501c3, the foundation is bound by these IRS-defined charitable categories, and you know, as a foundation and as a 501c3, we do take these guidelines seriously. So these CIP grants are for charitable purposes, and green light, as long as they follow one of these, you're good to go. So obviously red light. After the green light comes red light. Please keep these guidelines in mind when planning for your project. So this applies to every grant opportunity. E&F grants may not be used for fundraisers, general community events, poster and or essay contests. They may not be used to benefit only lodge members and their families. They may not be used for state major projects or national Elks programs. They may not be used to fund scholarships, youth awards nights, or appreciation dinners. CIP grant funds cannot be used for lodge maintenance and or repairs of any kind. They also can't be used to run the hoop shoot or the soccer shoot. So again, this applies to every grant opportunity we have available, and make sure to keep these in mind when you're planning a grant project. So following those guidelines, maybe you have an idea in mind already, but how do you get to the online applications? How do you apply for this money? So it's right here, the 2016-17 Gratitude, Beacon, Promise, Freedom, and Impact Grant applications opened on July 1st. So they're open, ready, and available for you right now. And secretaries have automatic access to applications through CLMS, which is the photo at the right. And if you're not familiar with CLMS, then perhaps you're not a secretary. If you are a secretary, you should be pretty familiar with the CLMS dashboard, and that red arrow shows where you can find our grant applications, easy access in the ENF hotline box. Please keep in mind that applications are online only. We cannot accept any additional information for any grant applications via email, fax, or mail. All pertinent information must be on the online application. I promise there's enough room to fit it all. The boxes expand. You can type as much as you want. We do ask that everything you'd like to be considered be on the online application. So, just showed you where to find the applications on CLMS for secretaries, but applying for grants is not just the secretary's job. The Lodge Secretary has the ability to appoint anyone from the Lodge as a grants coordinator. And the grants coordinator can access online applications through the ENF website using their elks.org username and password. So just a note, if you're appointed to be a grants coordinator, that's all you can access. You can only access the grant dashboard and everything that comes with it. So only the grant application. So if you're secretary worried about giving access to multiple of your lodge members, just know that they can only access the online grant applications. They can't access CLMS reports, anything like that, just the online grant applications. Some suggestions we have is that the grants coordinator should be computer savvy, since, like I had just mentioned, the grant applications are online only, and lodges can have more than one and can appoint them at any time. So if you have someone who's just interested in applying for the Promise Grant, for example, and then you have someone who's interested in just applying for the Freedom Grant, that definitely, you can definitely do that. You can appoint both people. And then just another note, the grants coordinator should ideally be involved with the grant from start to finish. We do ask for contact information on our grant applications, and that primary and secondary contact that you put in will be the people we'll be contacting once the grant is approved, all the way through once we're looking for that final report form. So make sure that the coordinator is someone who's invested in not only applying for grants, but running the grant program and reporting on it after. More information on this can be found at enf.elks.org/grants coordinator. And another great thing is just a note, kind of new this year, or really new last year, is that the grant dashboard includes all pending applications as well as applications from previous years. So as a grants coordinator, you will have access to see what the lodge has applied for and received in the past through our grant dashboard. So lodge secretaries, if you're listening, make sure you appoint at least one grants coordinator. I know you have a lot to do already, and it really helps to have someone else on board to help apply for these grants and get excited about running grant projects. So with that quick overview of the who, what, where, when, why of grants, specifically our overarching restrictions, and then how to appoint a grants coordinator and where you can find those applications, let's dive into the specifics. And we're going to dive into the Gratitude Grant first. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea Dennis.
Hi, it's Chelsea again, and I'm going to go over the Gratitude Grant for you all. So the Gratitude Grant is a way for the ENF to thank you for raising the GER's per capita goal. So $2,000 becomes available to lodges once you reach that goal. This year per capita is $4.65. The Gratitude Grant project must be for a local charitable activity. So that means that it would be a project that would impact the surrounding community that the lodge is in. I want to stress that before starting a project, the lodge must apply first. We cannot give reimbursement for projects that have already occurred. So please take that into account. Also, every lodge in which more than 15% of the members have donated will be eligible for a bonus of $500 when applying for the Gratitude Grant. To know whether the lodge is eligible for that bonus, you can visit enf.elks.org/reports to look at your lodge's current per capita. Applications for the Gratitude Grant closed May 31st, 2017 and must be used by July 31st, 2017. Also, when looking at the gratitude grants, we want you to consider that while donations do qualify, we really encourage lodges to look for opportunities in which the lodge can be actively involved. This is so the community can actually see the work that the Elks are doing in the community. So while donations do assist organizations in carrying out their goals, it does little to increase the Elks visibility in the community. So really think about doing a activity that really gets the Elks involved when writing your application. So for example, the lodge may want to donate to a food bank, but a better project for the lodge would be to have a food drive and to serve a meal to families in need. That way the lodge is touching the lives of people face to face instead of just handing over a check to a nonprofit where only a handful of people would see that. So likewise, like donating to 6 youth groups when you can do a project such as a drug-free or drug awareness project, or if you want to restore a city building, you can get Antlers or other youth involved in a community beautification day, or even donating to veterans groups. Think about volunteering at a stand down or reaching out to different organizations that work with veterans in need. And lastly, like giving supplies to the fire department or the police department. Instead, partner with both groups and do a community safety day for youth or just the community in general. So, this year I will be reviewing the Promise Grant, so this is a first for me. So just a heads up, if you receive a follow-up email asking for clarification, don't worry, I just need a little bit more information about your grant. A quick overview of the Promise Grant. $2,500 is available to the first 500 lodges that submit an application. This does not require a lodge to reach per capita or has a donation requirement, so if you would like to apply, go ahead and do so. Applications did open on July 1st, and they are awarded on a first-come, first-served basis. So applications will close when all of the 500 are awarded, or by March 31st, 2017, whichever one is first. And your project must be completed by July 31st of 2017. So last year, the last Promise Grant was awarded on September 15th. So we are expecting for the last of the grants to be given out around that time in September. In some cases, there are promise grants that are returned in which lodges were not able to do their project. At that time, we do take a look at them, at other applications that were waitlisted, but that is very rare. So try to get your application in as soon as possible. So the requirements for a promise grant is that it must be a youth activity, that it must be engaging, and it must be an Elks-led event that meets one of these needs, or what we call 5 promises to youth. So it provides youth with safe places, promotes healthy living, offers support from caring adults, emphasizes the importance of education, and encourages community service. So by activity, when we say it must be used for a youth activity, this means no donations and Elk involvement is required. When we say engaging, we mean that the project should give youth and Elks a chance to come together and have meaningful interactions, and it should focus on youth who are at risk or underserved. So after going over the requirements, let's take a look at some of the project ideas. So as I stated before about Elks having a presence in the community, this with gratitude grants, the same applies for promise grants. So distributing drug awareness supplies would not qualify. However, holding an after prom party at the lodge would. So sponsoring a little league team would not qualify, but coaching an intramural sports league would. Or having a holiday party for children and grandchildren of the Elks wouldn't be considered charitable, since it would be serving the members of the lodge. So think about throwing a holiday party for foster children or another set of children in need. The dictionary project would not qualify as well. So a more active project would be holding a reading fair or a youth book club. Likewise, a donation to the Boys and Girls Club would not qualify. So a more active project would be taking the youth from the Boys and Girls Club on a field trip. So these are a few things to consider when thinking about your Promise Grant. Next, we will go over the Beacon Grants, and Jocelyn will give you some information on that.
Hi there, everyone. This is Jocelyn Moya again, Programs Assistant, and I handle the Beacon Grants. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what that means. Okay, so Beacon Grants are $2,000 grants available to every lodge regardless of giving to the ENF. Applications opened on July 1st, 2016, and they won't close until March 31st, 2017. So you have quite some time, but we do encourage you to submit an application as soon as you have an idea for a project. And projects must be completed by next July 31st, 2017. Okay, so the Beacon grant requirements are pretty basic. They must be a new project for the lodge, meaning something the lodge wasn't already doing without our grants. All of our lodge grants are intended to allow the lodge to expand its charitable efforts, but the Beacon grant specifically cannot be used for a project that has previously been funded by the lodge. All funds must be for a new project or to expand an existing project by increasing the number of people served or extending the event to another time of year. The project must be new the first time the lodge applies for the Beacon grant, but ideally the lodge will continue to use their Beacon grant for the same project after that. Beacon grants must be ongoing, not a one-time event. Again, we anticipate that these will be at least annual events, but depending on the project, consider trying to make your project quarterly, monthly, or weekly. Some of the best projects we see happen more than just once a year. Beacon grants must be Elks-led, which means Elks involvement is key. Involvement is the major component of a Beacon grant. If your lodge's application doesn't include significant Elk involvement, we cannot approve it. And we'll suggest some ways that the lodge can get involved and try to work with you to make that work as a Beacon grant. But that involvement needs to be there. Make sure the lodge is in charge of the grant funds, and there are a great deal of opportunities for members to get involved. Lastly, it must be an activity, meaning that it cannot be a donation. It can't be a simple donation of funds or supplies. Beacon grants cannot be split between charitable populations either. It should focus on serving one group of individuals through ongoing activities. Those are all pretty straightforward. They might seem a little overwhelming, but they're all pretty simple. Okay, so here are some things to consider when applying for a Beacon grant. Things that don't qualify would be the dictionary project, but instead perhaps you could do an Youth and Elks reading fair because that has the active Elk involvement component beyond just donating the books. A donation to Wounded Warriors would not qualify, but twice yearly outing with the Wounded Warriors would qualify. Little League sponsorships do not qualify, but a baseball clinic for at-risk youth would qualify. Purchasing equipment for the Scouts also doesn't qualify. But if you wanted to take the Scouts out on quarterly camping outings, that could qualify, or service projects. A donation to DARE wouldn't qualify, but monthly drug-free events for teens, that could qualify. Flag Day dinner for Elks who are veterans does not qualify, but holiday activities for the VA hospital residents could. That's because we do have our 5 areas of greatest need for veterans, which Colleen will talk about later under the Freedom Grant. So while all of these projects listed here are well-intentioned, the qualifying projects create an opportunity for lodge members to interact with one another and the community in a meaningful way. So that's just the Beacon Grant Basics, but if you ever have any questions, you can feel free to contact our office and we'll be happy to answer them for you. I'm going to pass it back over to Colleen now and she'll go over the rest of the grants.
All right, thanks Jocelyn and thanks Chelsea. You guys did a great job explaining your expertise in the Beacon, Gratitude, and Promise grants. I just want to reiterate what Jocelyn said. If you ever have any questions regarding any of these grants, please give us a call. You can speak directly to Jocelyn about the Beacon grant. You can speak directly to Chelsea about the Gratitude and the Promise grant. And just know that we are here for you. So if you have any questions about follow-up you get or anything like that, don't hesitate to send a quick email or pick up the phone. So we've gone over quite a bit and we have 2 more grants to go, and the next 2 grants I'm going to talk about are our competitive grants. So while every lodge has an opportunity to apply for and get a Beacon and a Promise grant, and given your per capita goal a Gratitude grant, the Freedom and the Impact grant are only available on a competitive basis. So let's talk about the Freedom Grants. Freedom Grants are $2,000 grants available to the 180 lodges whose applications are judged to best serve the needs of veterans and/or active duty military members. So these competitive grants are funded by the Elks National Foundation but are managed by the Elks National Veterans Service Commission. So what that means is the Elks National Veterans Service Commission office will take a look at all the applications at once and then fund the 180 strongest applications. A quick note on that, meaningful ELK involvement is strongly encouraged and it increases your chance of approval. Basic dates, applications open right now. Like I had mentioned at the onset of this presentation, they close on July 31st at 12 noon Central Time. There's no exceptions to this. Make sure you get it in by the 31st. And projects must be completed by July 31st, 2017, like the rest of our grants. So, what makes up a good Freedom Grant application? Well, the Freedom Grant must focus on one of these 5 areas of increased need for veterans, and that includes employment, homelessness and housing, military families, health, or educational support. And you see that asterisk there, and please keep these requirements in mind because they also apply to any grant actively serving veterans. So for the Freedom Grant, your project must hone in on one of these areas of increased need. So a good example of that is that, you know, while general appreciation dinners open to all veterans in the community are great, a strong Freedom Grant project would focus in on perhaps veterans who are in a VA hospital or a nursing home and don't get opportunities like that, or perhaps homeless veterans or military families with spouses stationed overseas. A focus on those populations of veterans in need is what is required for the Freedom Grant. The Freedom Grant can be split between multiple veterans projects, but just a note on that, the strongest applications focus in on one of these areas, focus in on one population in need, and have much active ELK involvement. Last year, we received about 450 Freedom Grant applications to give you an idea of how competitive they were, and we only fund 180. So get those in quick. Again, they're competitive, so once they're in, and then they're all taken at once, and then judged, and then we will notify recipients in September. So any questions about the Freedom Grant, again, you can call our office. I would recommend checking out our Freedom Grant website and also the Elks Veterans Service Commission website for more information on these 5 areas of increased need. All right, so if you can't get enough grants and you'd like to get in on our impact grant. This is our most competitive, largest, most work, biggest time commitment grant. And so as such, we do award up to $10,000 for these large-scale service projects. These applications are involved. They require a lot of information. They require a lot of work on the part of not only the primary contact, but the entire lodge, and they are our most competitive and biggest grants. So they're Elks developed, Elks driven, and Elk involvement is the key ingredient to a successful impact grant project. Applications opened on July 1st and they close on September 9th at 12 p.m. noon Central Time, no exceptions. That's in bold so we all remember that very important deadline. We'll announce the impact grant recipients in late October, and then the funds are to be used the calendar year of 2017. So we would like to make some of these deadlines and a little bit confusing. The impact grant is on the calendar year for the funds, whereas all of our other grants, like we had mentioned, are from July 1st through July 31st of the next year. And again, that exciting announcement, we increased the impact grant pool this year by $100,000. Last year was our most competitive year for the impact grant. We funded 63 of our 157 applications, and there was the most new applications and also the most lodges looking for funding above 2 years. So the impact grant, again, requires the most involvement, requires the most work, and as such, our biggest, most competitive grants. So a couple things to consider about the impact grant. I could go on and on about the impact grant for over an hour, and so as such, I'm just going to hit the keys, and then I will be holding a impact grant bootcamp webinar at the end of this month. So if you're interested in diving more into the impact grants and what makes a strong project and a strong application, join me at the end of this month. That link will be going out soon. But just for now, let's go over a couple basic things about the impact grant. Like I mentioned, and you might be sensing a theme here, Elk involvement is key. Elk involvement is one of the most important things we look for in a strong impact grant project. It requires Elk volunteers. It cannot be a donation. If you're simply thinking of handing a check over to a large community or major project that someone else is running, that is a no-go, dead on arrival. It needs that Elk involvement. Another key to a strong impact grant project is having a strong plan at the very beginning. A good idea is just the start. We want to know the details. How often will these activities occur? How many Elks are needed? How will funds be spent? The application is divided into 5 sections, and each section has about 5 or 6 questions, and we do ask for a pretty detailed budget. So we need a lot of info on these applications, and all that info kind of needs to be pretty well thought out before you apply. I can't tell you how many times our impact grant committee looks at applications that have a fantastic idea and a great statement of need, but after that the details fall apart because perhaps the lodge hasn't gotten that far into planning. Make sure that the details of the who, what, where, when, and why are all on that application. So if you have a strong plan, you want to be prepared and start early. So like I had said, often we receive applications for projects that sound like they could be good, but we don't have enough information to make a decision. Make sure that we have more than enough information to make that decision. So again, this is just the basics of the impact grant. If you need more information about this, go on our website, look at all of the impact grant resources posted there. We have our impact grant slides from our seminar at the convention in Houston last week. We also have more information on the breakdown of the scoring and resources galore, a toolbox for project managers, that sort of thing. You can read all about the projects we funded this past year to get ideas. Definitely check out that website and join me at the end of this month for our boot camp before you turn in that application. So I just mentioned a couple of resources for the impact grant, but we have a ton of CIP resources on our new CIP website. So make sure you jot down this this link. Visit enf.elks.org/CIP Resources for a plethora of links related to applying for and running successful grant projects. So we have our CIP Toolkit, which is a step-by-step guide to developing a charitable grant project, FAQs, a printable calendar, a news release generator to generate professional news releases to share with local media. We have links to all of our final report forms, so once you get that grant, you can go online and print out an extra copy of the final report form. We have an archive of recordings for all of our CIP webinars, including this one you're sitting through right now. We have that link to the CIP participation report I mentioned earlier, where you can check out the bonus, as well as your status on all of our grants for this year. We also have a beginner's guide that kind of goes through everything we've gone through here, along with a couple tips on troubleshooting for our online application. So if you ever have a question, check out our website, write down this link. This is where you can find everything. We also have a printout version of our field guide on there. So if you wanted another copy, you could go right there. And we have a link to our Elks in Action page, which is even more resources for you, ideas on stories of successful grant projects we funded in the past. So this is a can't miss area of our CIP website. Make sure you go there if you have any question at all. So I had already mentioned the Impact Grant Bootcamp webinar, but here's a look at our webinar schedule for the rest of 16-17. Now, just a disclaimer, these dates are subject to change, and we'll always make sure to keep you in the loop for date changes and more information about registering for these upcoming webinar opportunities. But just take a look at what we have on the slate upcoming. We'll have a webinar again on the Impact Grant. We'll talk about our final report forms in August. We'll dive into our toolkit and we'll talk about all of the resources we have available for developing charitable projects and making sure that you make the best impact with those grant dollars. In October, we'll talk about Beyond the Basket, which will talk a little bit about how you can go beyond that Christmas basket program and serve those in need in your community beyond just the holidays, which get a lot of attention. Talk about publicizing your project in November, creating strong partnerships, and then we'll go dive into Beacon Grants in a little bit bigger way in January as that deadline on March 31st gets closer. So again, these are our upcoming webinars if you're interested in learning even more about the CIP and all of our resources available. So make sure to stay tuned for these opportunities. All right, so we just went through a lot of information in not a lot of time. So if you have any questions at all, if you need some guidance, make sure to contact our office and we'll help turn your idea into a great grant project. So visit our website, give us a call there, or email us at lodgegrants@elks.org. Again, like I had mentioned, we're always here to help. We want you to use this money. So if you have any questions, especially about a follow-up email you may get from us, just know that we're here to help. We're here to make sure that your grant project is the best it can be and that you can utilize these funds in your community. So with that, again, we went through a lot in just a short amount of time. If you have any questions at this juncture, feel free to put those in on the right-hand side. And then if not, again, email later. Look out for this recording posted on our CIP webinar page, and thanks so much for joining us today. Okay, so I have a question right here from Paul, which is a great question. Do 2015-16 final reports have to be in and approved to apply for 16-17 grants? That's a great question. So as you probably noticed, we have this little bit of gap time here with our 15-16 and 16-17 CIP grants. So 15-16 final report forms are not due until August 31st, 2016. But since our applications are available online right now, you do not have to have the 15-16 final report forms in and approved before you apply. Go ahead and jump online and apply right now as long as your lodge is in compliance. You do not need to have that 15-16 final report form in and approved yet. All right. I have a question about sending this presentation in PowerPoint form. I'd be more than happy to. If you are doing a grant training session or any sort of overview on grant opportunities or the ENF, I would be more than happy to send you a version of this these slides so you can give the presentation as well. So I would be more than happy to email that to you. Okay, so we have a specific question about the Freedom Grant. This is a great question. So when we say that grants can't be used for appreciation dinners, does that mean we cannot use a Freedom Grant to provide a holiday dinner for homeless veterans and their family? That is not the case. When we say appreciation dinners, what we mean is general appreciation dinners for the entire community. If the lodge would like to use a grant for a holiday dinner for homeless veterans and providing them supplies and things that they may need, that definitely qualifies for a Freedom Grant and for a Beacon and a Gratitude Grant too. So again, appreciation dinner, what we mean by that is general appreciation for general veterans population. Since a specific holiday dinner is specifically for homeless veterans, that qualifies, it falls within our 5 areas of increased need, and it would definitely qualify. That's a great question. All right, I also have a typo here. CIP Resources is not spelled correctly on one of the slides. It should read CIP Resources, CIP RESOURCES, Resources. Sorry about that. All right. All right, I have a question here. Is it okay to go into partnership with another organization using our grant money? Yes, definitely. We do encourage lodges to partner with local organizations helping the population that you would like to help in need. It's definitely okay to partner on a project or an event. Just know that for a lot of our grant opportunities, like we had mentioned, that elk involvement is key. So as long as you're not handing over a Beacon grant check to run a event, but rather partnering in a real way to put on an event with another organization, that definitely qualifies. Is the toolkit site only available to grant coordinators? Great question as well. No, it is not. All of those resources on the CIP resource page are available to anyone and everyone who'd like to access them. So the general public has access, secretaries, grants coordinators. You do not need to have an elks.org username and password to access those resources. And again, the URL is CIP Resources. I apologize, I forgot that S. All right, I have another specific question about the Freedom Grant. Can the Freedom Grant be used for an outreach program, including a brunch for Korean veterans, Vietnam vets, and Desert Storm veterans? Yes, you could use the Freedom Grant for outreach programs. Make sure that the project is specific about what need you'll be filling and how it will be helping those veterans beyond just, providing meals. So what kind of, specifically about the outreach and resources that you'll have there, that could be a strong Freedom Grant application. That's a great question. All right, I think those are all the questions I have right now. There's some great questions, guys. I can definitely send, again, copies of this presentation in PowerPoint form to anyone who asks. Just simply go ahead and email lodgegrants@elks.org. I can also send hyperlinks to brochures. I can send the hyperlink to the CIP field guide, and all of that again can be found at CIP Resources. Again, resources spelled with an S in the middle. So if we don't have any more questions, I think we're all set. So again, thanks so much for taking the time and spending some of your afternoon with us here at the CIP. We certainly appreciate you and all of your commitment to making your community better, and we're happy to be a part of it through our CIP grants. So thanks so much.